Hi there. It is later July here in the Midwest, and it is time, I believe, to harvest most of my onions. Let me show you a few that I've already harvested and tell you a little bit about my onion crop this year. Let me get the camera turned around. All right, so the smaller ones you see here all came from my bigger garden, and that garden this year had all of my gardens for vegetables are raised beds, and that garden was had been used for 2 years and needed to be topped up with soil. I made a video about that, and because of when I could get access to the soil that I wanted, these onions did not get planted until sometime closer to the middle of April. I think it was April 8th or maybe a couple days after, so almost the middle of April. And as you can see, they're all a lot smaller. Most of them were in places where they should have gotten plenty of sunshine. They just, I think, got planted a little bit too late to be able to have enough time to put on enough greens to put on a good sized bulb. Compare that with these that got planted in the smaller garden, which we topped up in the fall, and I was able to plant these March 20th. So at least a couple of weeks before all of these were planted. And as you can see, much bigger amount of greens, much bigger bulbs. Now, not every onion that's in that garden, which is what I'm going to show you today that I'm going to be harvesting, got quite this big, but they are all significantly bigger plants and therefore bigger onions than these. Now, these are still just fine. This here is probably what I'll start with for my dehydrating of onions, because that was something I found I used a lot through the winter months, was my jar of dehydrated chopped up onions. So that's probably what most of these small ones will be used for, or fresh use here in the late summer. These should store better. Most of these, I think actually, I only have 2 kinds in my small garden. These are a Patterson, which is a good long day option for climates like mine where we have colder winters, hotter, more humid, long day summers. That's something, do your research. If you want to grow onions, you need to look at where you're at, how long your summer days are. I live in a place where days in the summer are very long, so I grow long day onions. If you live somewhere more in the southern part, say, of the United States, you want to grow short day onions, because otherwise they won't get enough sunlight to be triggered to bulb up. Anyways, so these are Patterson. These are a mix of Patterson, sweet Spanish, and then a couple of different red onion types. So anyways, unintentional experiment this year, starting your onions in the ground or getting your onion seedlings in the ground mid-March. Way better results. So let's go out to the garden and we will get the rest of the ones in the small garden harvested. Okay, so we're in the garden, and what you're looking for to know when your onions are ready is for them to have flopped over at the base here of the stem, where the stem meets the bulb. When it looks bent like this and it's very floppy, like if you stand it up, it just flops back over, the neck is bent, that is the sign the onion is done. Now, if you live in a drier climate, you could potentially leave them in your garden to do a little drying out and get started on the curing process, which is essentially letting the outer layers of the onion dry down so that they get that really papery feel on a couple of the layers, and the greenery dries down to be like this. I do not live in a climate that stays dry necessarily in the summer, so I need to pull mine. And honestly, picking onions is one of the easiest things. You just wiggle, shake off any dirt, which is also why it's a good idea to pick when it's been when there's been no rain. You also, therefore, when your onions get like this, stop watering them, because that way you have a lot less damp dirt on your roots, and that is desired because you're going to leave these sit somewhere where they are going to have some airflow. I'm going to be putting mine in my garage with a fan on them, as you saw the ones that are already in there, and leave them sit for a couple of weeks until we get a couple more layers of the onion to be dry like this. That will help them store longer. And then what we'll do is we'll trim off the roots and we'll trim off the stem. This will dry down as well and become crunchy. And you want that so that this kind of seals up and closes up so that you don't have an opening there for things to crawl down into your onion as it sits in your pantry or your cold storage or your root cellar. So basically that's it. You just pick them, shake off as much dirt as you can without being too aggressive. You don't want to break off or damage any of these layers that are still a little delicate. I am going to just brush off some of the damp dirt very gently, and that's it. And then you set them out somewhere where they've got some good airflow, let them cure. As they're sitting out, I try to keep these from touching each other so that we don't create an environment there where you've got damp dirt being kept damp. It's not as big a deal if the greens are overlapping. Obviously space becomes at a premium. If you have any onions like this one that's still sturdy on the stem, leave it. It may bulb up more. So we're going to leave that guy go as long as the stem is standing upright, and that's all there is to it. It's time to get the rest of these harvested, and I will show you what they all look like. As I'm doing that, I interplanted some carrots, so I will be checking the carrots to see if any of them look like they're ready to be harvested. It's quite dense in here, so you can see, sorry, the sniffles. Some of my onions are a little bit smaller where the carrots maybe overshadowed them a little bit too much. I didn't factor in how big the greens on the carrots were going to get for the onions that are planted a little closer. And my cucumbers are now kind of getting all over the place, but that's okay because the onions for the most part are done, and so are the carrots. So I'm just sticking this cucumber up there so that it will vine up the side of the garden. This is a great way to maximize your space in your garden, planting things that will trellis. If you've got fencing like this, plant them on the edge and then let them vine up, and that way you're not taking up any of your bed space. All right, so I'm going to get these picked. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. All right, here is the harvest. There are a couple that I left in the garden that their necks were not broken. The majority of, so all of the lighter colored ones that you see on this table are the variety Patterson. It's a good performing long day onion for me here in the Midwest. These that kind of look like red onions are actually a type of shallot called Matador. You can see some of them split, but generally they would have two parts that look like a little onion. I like shallots. They're nice for when I don't need a whole big onion. These were a little wet, so you can see here that it looks kind of wrinkled. It's a little smushy when I push my finger on it. So several of the ones that looked like this that actually also had skin areas that looked kind of almost like it was rotting, I did go ahead and peel off because of how so very wet they were and how smushy it was underneath. I'm hoping, so like here's one where you can see and it's still kind of smushy. So we'll see how this cures. I'm going to be watching these carefully, and then the ones where I pulled that off, I want to see how they cure as well. If it looks like I've pulled off too much, then I'll have to go ahead and just cut these up, dehydrate them. But these, for some reason, were a little wetter. So I'm going to have to watch them closely to make sure that we don't have rot set in, and then it'll just smell really bad, and then we'll lose them. So that's the shallots. Got some good sized Pattersons, so I'm hopeful that once these cure, they'll be able to last in the pantry for several months. As you can see here, what I've made sure is that all of the bulbs have plenty of airflow. I've put the first couple layers here in these shallow trays that have kind of ridges. That helps give some airflow underneath. I've got a fan blowing on everything. And then as I've stacked back on the greens, I've tried to make sure that every bulb has good access to air and isn't buried in the greens. And then over here are the smaller ones that came from the bigger garden. You can see there were a few that sized up somewhat, but like really most of them are little golf ball size, but that's okay. These will get, once they're cured up a little bit, skinned, trimmed, and diced up and put through the put in the dehydrator for my winter supply of dried onion. Thank you very much for joining me here today in Aunt Susan's garden, harvesting the onions.